A very good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of Walters Kluwer, a warm welcome to our speaker today and attendees on this medical webinar under our new medical ed series. Our topic today is approach to wide QRS complex tachycardia, and our speaker today is Dr. Archit Bulur, who is additional professor of medicine, Kasturba Medical College, Bangalore, under the aegis of Manipal Academy of Higher Education. Yes, we'll be taking all the questions at the end of the webinar, and I request you to please post all your questions in the Q&A panel of this event. We'll try to address the maximum questions at the end. I also request you to please provide your valuable feedback via a link which we will post in the chat section of the webinar. I request Dr. Archit to please start the session. I'm giving him the presenting rights. Dr. Archit, sir, I've given you the presenting rights.
Yeah. Is the screen visible? Are you able to see the screen? Hope the screen is visible. Okay. So I think today's session we are going to discuss this topic. This is part of the launch of the Washington Manual of Medical Therapeutics, the first South Asian edition which has been launched. And one of the important topics that we have covered extensively in that is arrhythmias. So, and the book was launched last month. So today's session, basically, I'll be briefly covering on approach to wide QRS tachycardia. How do you clinically make out the types and how do you manage that? So the overview of the session would be basically, we'll briefly discuss the definition, the causes of wide QRS tachycardia, what are the diagnostic criteria, how can we clinically make out whether there is this is a VT or an SVT with aberrancy, on physical examination how do you differentiate, and basically we'll concentrate on ECGs. Based on ECGs, how do we differentiate certain clues, and certain criteria are there which are required for you. The postgraduates who are appearing for your exams and all these are asked for you, and also in general practice it would help. And then we'll briefly overview the management of the patient. So when we say tachyarrhythmias is when we have the heart rate of more than 100. So it could be a narrow complex tachycardia or a wide complex tachycardia. Basically, we are talking about the QRS complex. If the QRS width is more than 120, we call it as wide QRS tachycardia. And if it is less than 120, we call it as narrow complex. The next basic thing that we have to differentiate when we see the QRS and the tachycardia is whether it's a regular tachycardia or an irregular tachycardia. Please remember, for all practical purposes, irregular tachycardias are always atrial fibrillation, be it narrow complex or be it wide complex. Be it a narrow fast tachycardia, irregular, that's atrial fibrillation. Even a wide complex, irregular tachycardia is atrial fibrillation. So these are the two important things that you have to remember. Whenever it is irregular, it is almost always atrial fibrillation. If it is regular, then we have certain differentials, like if it is a narrow complex, most often it is an SVT. It could be an AVNRT or an AVRT. It could be sinus tachycardia, atrial flutter, or sometimes junctional tachycardia. Wide complex tachycardia, the two most common causes of regular wide complex tachycardia is ventricular tachycardia and SVT with the underlying aberrancy. So if an SVT occurs and the QRS morphology is already different or widened due to either an aberrancy or maybe due to a chamber enlargement or maybe because of a pacemaker, it would appear like VT. So our basic discussion of today's session would be pertaining to this entity of a regular wide complex tachycardia, because if it is irregular, we are going to discuss this as atrial fibrillation alone. So as we said the definition way back in 1986 and earlier also, the definition was given by Stewart, where he defined wide complex tachycardia as when the QRS duration is more than 120 milliseconds and the rate is more than 100. So basically, if you look at the broad complex tachycardias, majority of them are ventricular tachycardias. But yes, we have a small percentage of around 20%, which could be a SVT, but it looks like a VT, possibly due to underlying mechanisms, which we'll be discussing. Now, why do we have to differentiate? Basically, the differentiation is very important for us in the management. The etiology will be different for both of them, but the management, certain drugs which we are supposed to give for SVT, if we give it for VT, we are not going to have effects because of that. So that is why we have to differentiate whether it is a VT or a SVT. Now here is the ECG, you can see here. One of the ECGs which I have shown here, you have a regular tachycardia. You can see this rhythm strip here, and it's showing a regular tachycardia. Heart rate is more than 100, it's almost more than 150 to 200 there. And if you see the QRS morphology, the width of the QRS, if you're seeing there, it is occupying almost 1.5 large squares. So it is more than 120 milliseconds. So it's a broad complex tachycardia that you're seeing there. So when we see a broad complex tachycardia, for all practical purposes, we can take it as VT, but then we have to look into certain features to differentiate whether it is a ventricular tachycardia per se or a supraventricular tachycardia with a aberrant pathway. We'll discuss how to do that. Now, when we say, I told you the definitions of wide complex tachycardia, more than 80% of them, as we said, is ventricular tachycardia, 15 to 20% is SVT with aberrancy. You can have certain amount of pre-excitation syndrome. The commonest one that we have is your Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome, which can account for around 6% of broad complex tachycardias. So the various causes, if you see the ventricular tachycardia, as I told you, the SVT with aberration, that is either an RBBB or an LBBB, which is already there. Pre-excited, like we have the WPW syndrome. Or if a patient is already on antiarrhythmic drugs, if supposedly a patient is on antiarrhythmic drugs, because of the drugs, the QT interval could be, the QRS morphology would be broad. The QRS morphology could be broad, and because of that, you can have it. Especially if a patient is on class 1A and class 1C. Also, another group of drug that you have to remember is the tricyclic antidepressants. TCAs, whenever a patient consumes TCA, though we are seeing a few cases of TCA overdosage in India, but in the West, possibly it's one of the most common overdosages of drugs that is seen, where they come with a broad QRS morphology. The other important differential diagnosis always when you have a wide QRS is hyperkalemia. Supposedly a patient is on a renal failure or he's on drugs which can produce potassium high. You should always suspect hyperkalemia as a cause. Please remember, hyperkalemia and TCA overdose will produce a broad complex tachycardia, but the heart rate is always less than 120. It is not really fast. Okay. So whenever you see a slow VT, okay, when the heart rate is not more than 120 there, so it's a broad complex, but the heart rate is just around 100 if you see, then you should suspect two things, hyperkalemia and TCA overdosage. So if you see a patient who has come with a regular broad complex tachycardia, these are the things which I have told you. If it is an irregular, always remember atrial fibrillation is the cause. Whenever it's an irregular tachycardia, be it narrow or be it wide, it is always atrial fibrillation that you have to remember. Before we go on to how do we decipher the difference, the basic morphology that we have to understand is what is the LBBB morphology and what is RBBB morphology. All of you know it. If you have a broad QRS and it is predominantly negative terminal deflection that you're seeing in V1, it's a negative wave that you're seeing. Sorry, that is what we call it as an LBBB morphology. And if you have a positive deflection in V1, that is what we call it as an RBBB morphology. It looks like RBBB. Okay. So remember, whenever there is a bundle branch block, be it LBBB or an RBBB, the QRS width will increase. Okay. And whenever these patients develop a tachycardia, be it SVT, what will happen? Since the QRS is already broad, it will appear like a broad QRS tachycardia. But the QRS is not actually originating from the ventricle. Here it is the bundle branch block that you have to remember. RBBV morphology tachycardias, common MCQs that are asked for you. Which are the ones which are RBBV morphology tachycardias? The VTs which arise from the left ventricular outflow tract and the fascicular tract. LVOT VT, fascicular VT. These are the classical examples for RBBV morphology tachycardia. Sometimes you could have LV myocardio, perceived, be it ischemia or a dilated cardiomyopathy which is there. The LV myocardium can produce the source of ventricular tachycardia, and that can produce that. And sometimes the bundle branch reentrant VT. These are the classical RBBV morphology ventricular tachycardia. SVT, as we said, SVT has to be with the pre-existent RBBV. Now the LBBV morphology tachycardia, please remember RVOT, if the ventricular tachycardia has an origin from the right side. So three important causes: RVOT-VT, ARVD. All of you know ARVD is nothing but a congenital heart disease, arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia. And sometimes when you have a RVMI or an RV dilatation, from there you can get a ventricular tachycardia. All of these three will be LBBV morphology. So please remember, LBBV morphology is arising from the right side: RVOT, RVMI, and ARVD. Okay, whereas RBBV morphology is arising from the left side of the heart. SVT, which produces an LBBV morphology, is a common MCQ because it's a rare type of aberrant conduction. That's the Mahem fiber pathway. Whenever it has a aberrant pathway that occurs through that, you get that. So how do you differentiate whether, when we see a patient with tachycardia and a broad QRS complex, how do we know it is SVT or VT based on clinical history? The number one possibility you should always remember is the age. Older the age, the patient's chances of having VT is higher. This is not a hard and fast rule, but please remember 85% positive predictive value for that, age more than 35. Younger patients can also have VT, but younger patients are more likely to have SVTs. That is what we have to remember. Next, coming on to if there is an underlying heart disease. So if the underlying heart disease is there, if supposedly a patient has had MI in the last year, 98% chance of ventricular tachycardia. If the patient has heart failure, the chances are around 95% to develop VT. So somebody who has had a past history of MI or a recent MI or a year back he has had MI and he's on medications for that and now comes to the broad complex tachycardia, it's almost always it is ventricular tachycardia. You don't have to think again. If there is a pacemaker or an implantable cardiac defibrillator that is there, ICD is already in place. These are the patients who are prone to develop VTs. It is not SVT that is they are getting. You have drugs which produce something called as torsades. You have a large group of drugs which can produce torsades. Anything which prolongs the QT interval, always remember QT interval is the one which decides whether the patient goes into torsades or not. Torsades is nothing but a polymorphic ventricular tachycardia. Polymorphic ventricular tachycardia. So be it antiarrhythmic agents, be it simple drugs like azithromycin, hydroxychloroquine, or your antihistaminics, antipsychotics, all of them can produce torsades. So if somebody has those, then we know it is a VT that is there. Diuretics can produce hyperkalemia, can produce hypokalemia. Digoxin, if supposedly the patient has a hypokalemia and the patient is already on digoxin, it is VT that the patient would directly get. And the classical VT that you get in case of digoxin toxicity is what we call it as a bidirectional ventricular tachycardia. Now, on history, what would suggest a SVT? Because I told you all the points which for VT. Now, SVT is if the patient has had a previous history like this, okay, and he has been told that he has an SVT. It is not a ventricular tachycardia, it's a supraventricular tachycardia. Again, remember, many of the patients with SVTs can get these recurrent episodes and they may have to come to the casualty and have to adjust their drugs, or maybe sometimes they may require a DC version also. So prior episode, if it is there in a younger patient without any history of underlying cardiac or drugs, then it's more likely to be a SVT that could be seen. Coming on to examination, how do you differentiate whether it is an VT or an SVT? Please remember, when you have a VT, the ventricle is also beating, the atria is also beating. So there is an atrioventricular dissociation. There is an atrioventricular dissociation. So supposedly you have clinical evidence of atrioventricular dissociation. Please remember these 3 points. The 3 clinical points which could suggest atrioventricular dissociation is: number 1, the Canon A waves; number 2, the variable intensity of first heart sound; and number 3, the variation of the blood pressure, which is unrelated to respiration. If 3 points are there, especially if you see a JVP and a Canon A wave, you're very clear this is VT. SVT, you would not have it. Many of the supraventricular tachycardias can, the heart rate can come down when you do vagal maneuvers. Vagal maneuvers which suppress the AV node, like you have a carotid sinus massage or a cold saline immersion. The supraventricular tachycardias can come down, especially if they are AV nodal dependent ones. But VT will not respond to that. So this is how you make out on clinical. The next very important feature that we have to remember is the hemodynamic stability. For all practical purposes, ventricular tachycardia, when it happens, maybe for the first time, it is always hemodynamically unstable. Okay, the patients are more likely to be hemodynamically unstable. Whereas SVT with aberrancy, most patients can be hemodynamically stable. So the patient can walk in to the casualty saying that he has palpitations, and you take an ECG, you find that there's a broad complex tachycardia which is regular. It is more likely to be an SVT. If a patient has collapsed and he's been brought to the casualty and you take a broad complex tachycardia on ECG, it is possibly a VT that is there. Duration of the tachycardias, again, please remember SVTs are more likely to recover. VTs, if they survive, you may have to do a pacemaker or something for them, but otherwise VTs have a poor prognosis. Maneuvers, as I already mentioned, the vagal maneuvers, which act on the AV node, simple ones like a carotid sinus massage, or if you give certain drugs like adenosine, etc., and the tachycardia decreases, it's separately a SVT that is there. VT is unaffected by vagal maneuvers, which I've already told you, and that can sometimes when you give a vagal maneuver, your AV dissociation can be florid. You might be starting seeing the Canon A waves, and the S1 intensity might vary that you could get. Rate. Now, it is the least helpful for us to differentiate between VT and SVT based on the heart rate. Both can have a higher rate, both can have a rate above 150, both can have a rate above 200. So it does not make us differentiate. Regularity, as we've already mentioned right in the beginning, if it is irregular, irregularly regular, it favors AF, AF with aberrant conduction. So it's more like an SVT with apparent conduction. VT is always regular. Now, next feature that you see, set the rate, we saw the rhythm. The next part you see in the ECG is the axis. So
I think we are having technical difficulties here. Dr. Archit, I think, has just gone offline. Archit, are you here there, sir? I'm able to hear you, sir. Sir, your voice is not completely coming to us.
sorry for the interruption there. So we were discussing about how to differentiate VT or SVT based on the ECG criteria. We spoke about the rate, and then we spoke about the rhythm, and we were talking about the axis. We were talking about the axis, and I told you that the northwest axis or the that there is a difference of more than 40 degrees. If you have a difference of more than 40 degrees, from what it was in baseline. That is suggestive of ventricular tachycardia. In a RBBB morphology, now I've told you what is RBBB morphology. On V1, you're seeing positive. If the QRS axis is left of minus 30 degrees, it is VT. Whereas in case of LBB morphology, if it is more than plus 90, it is suggestive of ventricular tachycardia. But for all practical purposes, remember, if it is the extreme axis, it is VT always. Coming on to the QRS duration, this is one simple thing which I would like all of you to remember. The wider the QRS, the wider the QRS, the chances of VT is higher. So supposedly the QRS duration is more than 140 or it is more than 160. Okay, more the wider the QRS, the chances of it being VT is higher. So if the QRS width is possibly less than arising from the septum always has Coming on to the next point that you have to always remember is concordance. So concordance, what do you mean by concordance? I'll just show you the images for that. If you see all the chest leads which are there, V1 to V6, if you're seeing the leads, if all show a monophasic QRS, which is same polarity, it is more likely to be in a VT. Okay. So if you see the presence of concordance, as I told you, this is the negative concordance from V1 to V6. We are seeing everything is going down. So that's the negative concordance. And this is how a positive concordance is there. You see that all the QRS is pointed upwards. So whenever we have a concordance that is there, that is always suggestive of ventricular tachycardia. The next feature which I told you is AV dissociation, which we told clinically also. And a very important question that is asked for you, what are the ECG signs of AV dissociation? So atria has to beat and ventricle has to beat. So you have to make out some evidence of atria beating. How do you make out that? Look for P waves. So when you look for P waves, if you find any P waves anywhere, that's always suggestive of a VT. SVT will not have a separate P wave. Okay, P wave will be along with the QRS itself. So if you find that there is an atrial rate which is slower than the ventricular rate, so ventricular rate is 200, but the atrial rate, P waves are coming somewhere in the middle, is always diagnostic of VT. If it is the other way around, if the atrial rate is more than ventricular rate, it is SVT with aberrancy that is there. So AV dissociation is one important thing if you can make out on the ECG that will strongly help you for the diagnosis of VT. So various algorithms are there which start with AV dissociations. I'll come to that in some time. So dissociated P waves, I've told you. Fusion beats and capture beats. These are two important things that we're seeing. I'll show you the image for that. Fusion beats are nothing but two ventricular activities waveforms which are intermediate between a normally and a fully abnormal beat. So fusion beat, if it is there, again it's a sign of AV dissociation. You can see that this is the ventricular tachycardia, broad complex, and these are the normal beats you're seeing here. This is the normal beat, and between that you're having something called as a fusion beat. So whenever you have a fusion beat, that is also a sign of AV dissociation. The next one is what we call it as a Dressler's beat, which is a capture beat. Here, there are QRS complexes which come like a sinus QRS complex. So for some time, the VT stops and you get a captured sinus beat. Again, this is a very important sign of AV dissociation. You can see here, this is the classical tachycardia that's here. And here you get a capture beat that's there. And this is a fusion beat. Fusion beat is here. So if you find this on an ECG, definitely we are dealing with beat that is there. Okay, so if you see here, you classically see a broad complex tachycardia as we have discussed. So the rate, you can see that the rate is more than 150. So it's a fast tachycardia. It's regular. So atrial fibrillation is ruled out. Next, we make out the axis. So you see that lead 1 is positive, lead 3 is also positive. So northwest axis there. So both are positive. It is in the normal axis to leftward axis that is there. So that is not going to help us. Next, we look for the concordance. You see there V1 to V2. Here you're saying, and hopefully you're seeing the slides. You can see that all the QRS complexes are negative. QRS complexes are negative here in V1, V2, V3. But as you come to V5, V6, it's becoming positive. So here we do not have concordance. So that is also not favoring our VT diagnosis. The other feature that we are seeing, are you not able to see the slides?
We are able to, but Dr. Archit, but it's not been able
Moving
to.
now.
It's not going forward, I believe.
I'm in the same slide.
Yes.
I'm just in the same slide and explain.
Yes,
Is
sir.
the cursor visible?
Yes, sir. It is visible now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So as I told you, this is a broad complex tachycardia that you're seeing here, and there is no concordance. The axis also is not northwest, so able to very characteristically you can see here the fusion beats that you're seeing here. So when a moment you see the fusion beats, that means you're talking of ventricular tachycardia alone. So fusion beats and capture beat, though it's not so common that we get on a single ECG, maybe we'll have to take a monitor continuously, you might get sometimes there. So again, here we have a broad complex tachycardia. All of you can see that you're having a broad complex tachycardia here, and the morphology is RBBB. You can see V1, it's a RBBB morphology tachycardia that you're seeing there. Axis, it is normal axis, so that's not going to help us. We have to carefully look for P waves. Are you able to see some P waves? If you can carefully look at lead V1, you're seeing some P waves here. You can see one P wave here. You can see one more P wave here. Hope you're able to see the cursor where I'm showing. So if you are able to see the P wave, that means it is a feature of AV dissociation. And moment you see AV dissociation, your diagnosis becomes VT. If an old ECG available, you can always know whether the patient had a bundle branch block earlier or not. Otherwise, sometimes it is difficult to make out whether it is VT or not. Always look for clues of prior MR. Look for QT interval, because I told you QT interval prolongation are the ones which predispose a patient to going to VT, especially the torsades that were there. And also structural heart disease. Supposedly a pacemaker is in situ there. Then you know the pacemaker spikes are there. You will have a broad complex because of the pacemaker in place. So it is not necessarily a VT that could be there. So as we said, the QRS duration, I told you, more than 160, definitely VT. QRS axis, northwest is definitely VT. Concordance, definitely VT. Precordial RS pattern, I'll come to that. And certain morphological criteria are there in LBVP and RBVP. Presence of Q wave, if you see that there is a very stout Q wave. Q wave always says that it's an old MI or a ventricle that is damaged that is there, would always be a feature of VT that you could see. AV dissociation as evidenced by an atrial rate less than ventricular rate, capture beat or a fusion beat that's there, that's always a feature of VT. Look at the baseline ECGs, look for whether the axis is changing between the baseline ECG to the present or the ECG which you're taking during, or if there is any QT changes or there is a pacemaker artifact, etc. in the baseline ECG we can make out that could be there. One thing which helps you a lot about whether it's a VT or SVT is AVR. I'll come to that. And off late, you have a single lead, they have said, lead 2, you see something called as a RV, RV peak time criteria. That is one lead can help you to differentiate whether it is VT or not. We'll discuss a little bit in detail of this QRS duration. Since I've already finished, I won't go on to the details, but please remember QRS duration, broader the QRS, more chance of VT. So that's a simple thing that you can remember. QRS axis, I've already told you about. Northwest axis is always VT. The other ones is plus minus. Concordance is always part of VT, positive or negative. Either of the concordance, if it is there, it is always a feature of ventricular tachycardia. Precordial RS duration. Now, RS duration, if you see there, from the onset of the R wave, okay, from the onset of the R wave to the nadir of S wave, if it is more than 100 milliseconds, okay. So again, this is a very important feature to say the QRS is much broader. The QRS is much broader, and especially the initial part of the QRS, the nadir of S wave that's there. If it is a longer, so that means it is taking so much more time that's arising from the ventricle. So that is what you'll have to remember. It has a specificity of 98%, the precordial RS duration, more than 100 milliseconds. This has a 98% specificity to say it is VT. So if you see the RS pattern, you can see that from the beginning of the R wave to the peak of S wave, if that is more than 110, that's always suggestive of a VT that you should remember. When we see a RBBB morphology, when we see an LBB morphology, some criteria are there. So RBB morphology, we always V1. If you have an RSR pattern, okay, the classical RSR pattern where you have a small r, big S, and a very small r, or a capital R, that longer R dash coming later. All these patterns are consistent with SVT with aberrance. Okay, all these classical RBB patterns which are consistent with SVT. Supposedly you have an R only. Okay, you have a broad QRS there, slight slurring. You're not able to see the RSR pattern, and the R wave is more than 30. Such a big R wave that's there. That is suggestive of a VT. Or you have a QR pattern, a small Q wave there and a big R that is there. That is always suggestive. So always remember Q wave, if you see, it is VT. Q wave, if you see, VT. So you can see here in the image, you can see here. So this is the RBB pattern, the classical RSR, RSR, RSR. This is SVT. Whereas you see here, you get a big R wave only there. Here is the QR. You can see that QR. And you have something called as a rabbit ear phenomenon. You can see, you can imagine these two are the ear lobules of the rabbit which is sitting. If the right-sided ear, that's the first ear, is taller than the second ear, you can see that first one is taller than the second, it is VT. Whereas the second one is taller than the first, you can see here, second one taller than the first, it is SVT with aberrance. So just remember this, the rabbit ear phenomena which I told you. If the first ear is taller, it is VT. So again, this has a specificity of around 95%. Okay, I won't go on to the other criteria for RBB because this is the easier one. Now, if you see in LBBB, which lead we are seeing in V1, we'll have a downstroke like this. Okay, and in V6 you have a upstroke. Okay, you have a prominent. If you find a Q wave, please remember Q wave, a good Q wave that is there, it is always a feature of VT. And if you see, you can see here, there, you see here, there is a slope. You can see a slope that's there, a wide R wave, and you have a notching on the downslope of the QRS that you're seeing here. You can see there is a notch here. Okay, it's called as a Josephson sign there. It's always suggestive of a VT. Whereas in SVT, you can see a small R wave and a downstroke which is straight down, steep downstroke, right? So that is suggestive of a SVT. And SVT, usually the LBB morphology is preserved and you do not get Q waves in V6. So always remember Q wave. If you see a Q wave on a tachycardia that you're seeing, it is always suggestive of a VT that is seen. I don't want to go to this. Again, I've told you Q wave always VT. Okay. AV dissociation, we have already discussed. This is the most specific ECG finding. We have discussed various things that could be there, a Canon A wave, fusion beat, capture beats, or P waves if you see. We'll come to the individual ECGs later. Let me finish the criteria. Due to a little short of time, I'm going a little fast. The important two leads, if they ask you now in exam, very easy to make out, is lead AVR and lead 2. Now AVR changes, please concentrate on that. So if you find a small R wave in AVR, or you find an initial R wave or a Q wave which is more than a big Q wave, a stout Q wave, always this, remember the word stout Q wave in AVR, suggest VT that is there. Or sometimes you find a notch in the descending limb of the QRS that you see. I'll just show you the images for that. So this is the very specific, because you saw all the criteria had a specificity of above 95%, most of the criteria. But this is one criteria which has a sensitivity also around 96.7%. So AVR changes are a very, very important thing that helps us to make out whether it is VT or SVT. So this is what I told you about. So a broad R, or you have a deep Q and R, or a QS which is slurred notch. You can see that. This is how you can make out which is a VT in lead lead AVR. If these features are there, that is always suggestive of VT. Coming on to the new criteria that we have, or what is called as the PAVAS criteria. This is the latest criteria that has come. In 2010, this was framed. Here again, seeing only one lead, and here we are seeing something called as the R wave peak time. Okay, lead 2, the standard lead 2 you're taking. Standard lead 2 is useful because most of the ECG monitors that we have, generally you have lead 2 at least minimum is there. That's what you see. So on lead 2, you can see what we call it as an R wave peak time. And if it is more than 50 milliseconds, okay, if it is more than 50 milliseconds, you can see here, this is the R wave peak time, starting of the beginning of the R wave to the top. So if it is more than 50 milliseconds, it is diagnostic of VT. If it is more than 50 milliseconds. If it is lesser than that, then maybe it can be both. Again, please remember, this has a very high sensitivity and specificity. So two criteria that have the highest sensitivity and specificity is the AVR and the R wave peak time in lead 2. So based on these criteria, various algorithms have been proposed, and sometimes in the exam they ask you about these algorithms. The one algorithm that you have to know is the Brugada's algorithm. The same criteria which we discussed are there in the algorithm. I won't go into the details. You can go through about it. Brugada's algorithm, always see the RS complexes which we discussed, then the R2S interval, that is a very broad, then look for AV dissociation, and then finally apply the morphological criteria of LBVB, RBVB which we discussed. So again, that this criteria together has a specificity of 98.7 or 96.5. The Bayesian criteria, that's also a newer criteria that is there. The two simple criteria, as I told you, is the Brugada's or the AVR algorithm. I've discussed each point of this with you, so I'm not going to go to the details of that. Both of them have a specificity and sensitivity of 96.7. R wave peak time, we have already discussed. And always simple, remember, if sometimes it is better to diagnose VT, because if you treat something, a broad complex tachycardia as VT, it's always okay. But if you become more smart and you diagnose SVT there and with aberration, and sometimes you might miss the VT there, you might cause harm to the patient. So it's better to treat it as VT. So horizontal entrance to the ER, older patient, previous MI, it is VT. Younger patient, paroxysmal episodes, walks hemodynamically stable, more likely to be SVT. So here we have ECG. I think a few ECGs will go through and see this. You can see that there is a broad complex tachycardia that you're seeing here. So what do you think is the diagnosis? Is it a VT? Is it a SVT? Is it something else? Any one of you can message. Okay, I think due to want of time, I will go through it. So you can see there's a gross irregularity, isn't it? There's a gross irregularity. And though it's a broad complex tachycardia, when you have such irregularity, it is AF only. Okay, it is atrial fibrillation only. Now, why is the QRS complex broad then? If there is an atrial fibrillation, that means there is an underlying pre-excitation or an underlying bundle branch block that should be there. So always remember, before we classify into VT or SVT or something, look for the irregularity. Moment there is irregularity, it is always atrial fibrillation. We have some rare possibilities, but that is not important. This I've already finished, so I won't go about. Okay. Again, here you're seeing a broad QRS tachycardia. You see that lead 1 is positive and lead AVF is negative, so they're leaving. So it's almost an extreme of left axis that you're seeing. If you see V1 to V6, you're not finding the concordance. V1 is positive, V2 is positive. After that, it is negative. So you do not have a concordance. Next, look for signs of AV dissociation. You can see good P waves here, which is not coming regularly. Some of the leads are showing P waves, not all. But very characteristically, you're finding this fusion beats there and a capture beat that you're seeing here. So that is very specific. So AV dissociation is there. So that is suggestive of a VT. Now the two leads which I told you, one is the AVR criteria. You can see a stout R wave. That's enough to make the diagnosis of VT. Here lead 2, your R2S time, that is the peak time. Here it's a negative deflection. It looks very broad, so that is also positive, that is B. So various criteria, as we have discussed about the AV dissociation, the QRS duration, the morphological criteria, look for the axis, look for AVR, look for lead 2, all of them together, you make a diagnosis of VT or SVT. And once we make a diagnosis of VT or SVT, basically, whenever you see, look for regular, irregular. If it is regular, then you know it could be a VT or an SVT. So look for the various criteria that are there. Once you know it is VT, then you have to basically classify the patient whether he is an hemodynamically stable or a hemodynamically unstable. Hemodynamically unstable patient would require emergency management. Okay, you require to do the ACLS protocol and you have to immediately cardiovert the patient. If the patient is hemodynamically stable, then maybe we can use chemical cardioversion also. So whenever you have a VT, the drug of choice that we give for a ventricular tachycardia is lignocaine. So lignocaine or the lidocaine is the drug of choice that we give 1 to 1.5 milligram per kg IV, which is given over 2 to 3 minutes, followed by an infusion of 4 milligram per minute. That's the drug of choice that we use. You can use amiodarone, etc. If the patient is hemodynamically unstable, then we will have to give cardioversion. So cardioversion is the treatment of choice if the patient has hemodynamically unstable. So any patient who has hemodynamically unstable, you will have to cardiovert. If the patient is hemodynamically stable, we can use drugs, that is possible. So that's how you treat whether a patient has a VT or SVT, and then based on your diagnosis, you have to evaluate. Always remember, you will have to rule out ischemia, rule out hypoxia, rule out hypokalemia, hyperkalemia especially. And if the patient has come with altered sensorium, always look out for toxicity, especially tricyclic antidepressants. And always take a good drug history, and always ask the patients whether they have any earlier ECG. If there is an earlier ECG that is there, based on that you can always make sure what sort of pattern the patient is already having. So I think with that I have finished my presentation. We are open to any questions.
You, Dr. Archit. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for the presentation. Although there were some technical difficulties, and also that a few of the slides, many other attendees said that they have missed few of the slides. So I request you to please share your PPT with me so that I can share it with all the attendees post this webinar. And when I look at the session questions, so there are not many questions. Yes, there is a lot of good feedback that we have received so far. And I just that as many of the attendees have not been able to look at all the slides, so we'll be sharing the recording as well as the complete presentation of this session to all the attendees. Thank you so much, Dr. Archit, for joining us today and taking your busy time out, to give this presentation and this session. And also thankful to all my attendees and my co-people, like Dr. Vandana, Dr. Rekha, Dr. Chandan, who is part of my publishing team, and he also a part of this event. And thank you so much. And on behalf of Wolters Kluwer, we'll be bringing out more such session in the near future. Thank you so much. And now we conclude the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.